Good morning, David. How are you doing today? How's the weather in your corner of the world, David? Yeah, Andy, we've got. I've seen it 110 around Kingman more than once, but I don't think I've seen an entire week where they're talking 110 in Kingman. It's going to definitely be hot. But since you're from Bullhead City, I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. Good morning, Jill, Michael.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, mi amigos. And how's everyone doing this morning? Here in my corner of the world, we're about to kick off a week of record heat. Still, no matter how hot it gets here in Kingman, I find solace in the fact that, well, I don't live in Needles, California, or Bullhead City, or Lake Havasu City, which is about 60 miles to the west down in the Colorado River Valley. I've lived in this desert country long enough to be considered one of the dry roasted nuts. Still, you can get too much of a good thing. It's not my intent to pick on the folks down in Needles or Bullhead City. In all honesty, I admire their ability to survive the months of summer. So, how hot does it get in Needles? Well, it isn't purgatory. But I'd be willing to bet that with a bit of a squint, you can see it from there come August or during this next week's heat wave. It's been said that I can talk old cars and road trips for hours, even if I'm the only one in the room and still enjoy myself. But it looks better if I have an audience. That way I can share the adventure and I don't look quite so crazy. This morning, the topic of discussion is special places where our rich automotive history has been preserved. I'm going to kick it off this morning with Dutton Motors that opened in Kingman in 1946. This Ford agency, the Ford agency in Kingman actually opened in 1910 across the street from the railroad depot. Edsel Ford stopped there and inspected the facility on July 16, 1915, during his trip west along the National Old Trails Road. In late 1946, the Ford dealership was sold and it became a Pontiac facility. And then an all-new state-of-the-art Ford garage and sales facility was built to the west along Route 66. But a few months after Taylor Owen Ford opened, it was purchased by N.R. Dutton, who owned a garage in the mining town of Gold Road along Route 66 in the Black Mountains. Well, it remained a full-line Ford agency until 1957. That was the year it became an Edsel dealership. And when Edsel tanked, it was transformed into a GM store. A few years later, the Dutton family built a new dealership, and the old one was leased to the county road department. About 30 years ago, the family began restoring the dealership. It was then transformed into a restoration facility, a vintage car sales facility, and a museum. And also on display are relics from the family's century-long association with Route 66 and the National Trails Road. This is also the headquarters for the Route 66 Association of Kingman. On display is a diorama of Mr. D's Route 66 diner, created by the internationally acclaimed Dutch artist Willem Boer. And after you're done perusing the ever-changing array of vintage cars, stop in at the diner next door for a first-rate banana split. Mr. D's may look like a colorful caricature of the 1950s diner, but it's the real deal. It actually opened in 1939 as the Chemo Cafe and Shell Station. As an FYI, the D is for Roy Dunton that bought the cafe in 1990. This may seem a bit premature, but speaking of Dunton Motors, I thought it might be appropriate to drop a hint about Christmas. If you don't know what to get me this year, well, Dunton Motors has a nice Chrysler Airflow and a beautiful 1931 REO Coupe. They're both for sale, and either one would be greatly appreciated. In advance, thank you. Before moving on to our next stop, I'd like to give a shout out to wonderful, delightful little Tucumcari, New Mexico. Route 66 enthusiasts throughout the world make this town a destination, as it's home to the iconic Blue Swallow Motel, a neon-lit time capsule that dates to 1939. There's an array of wonderful Route 66 time capsules here, though, including the 1960 Motel Safari and the 1964 Roadrunner Lodge. But this is a town full of surprises. As an example, the Mesalands Community College Dinosaur Museum and Natural Science Laboratory has exhibits worthy of prestigious museums such as the Smithsonian. And it should be added as a must-see attraction for any Tucumcari visitor. The depot, well, that's well worth the visit, and so is the Route 66 Museum in the Convention Center. Bottom line, this town is well worth exploring. Next stop, we're going over to Auburn, Indiana. When the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum opened back around 74, my family and I, we were living in Jackson, Michigan. For more than 35 years, I have driven the roads around Auburn, and the schedule just never seemed to allow time to stop or catch them when they were open. Well, that all changed in October of 2019. For me, this museum is the holy grail of historic sites associated with the auto industry. And I wasn't disappointed. Housed in the company's original headquarters, the building is an architectural masterpiece. And during its restoration, features like bathroom fixtures, drinking fountains, and office details were preserved to give the feel of the 1930s. It's really a perfect setting for these automobiles that are rolling mechanical sculpture. The cars built by Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg are engineering masterpieces. The Cord was the first successful front-wheel drive car. Ruxton was there, J. Walter Christie did some front-wheel drive, but this was the one that did it. The Duesenberg, that car actually even changed our lexicon. The word doozy is a reference to the automotive superlative that was the Duesenberg. Here's an example. The company tested a supercharged Model SJ. And these are not little cars. These things are big. 0 to 100 mile per hour acceleration in 17 seconds. 104 miles per hour in second gear. And 129 miles per hour in top gear. There are also, these are some of the most stylish automobiles ever produced. They were not cheap. Like for example, a Duesenberg. A new Ford around in the 28, 29, Ford is $650. Duesenberg's $10,000. But the cars are only part of the story that's told here at the museum. See, E.L. Cord was a financial whiz kid, and he had his fingers in lots of pies, including Lycoming Engines, Stinson Aircraft, Checkered Cab Manufacturing Company. His story alone is well worth a visit and a study. The museum also has other milestone cars on display, and there are also experimental engines, engineering displays, and in good weather, outdoor exhibits. If you're an auto enthusiast, I highly recommend this museum. In fact, I put it near the top of the must-see list for auto enthusiasts. If you need further encouragement to make a detour to Auburn, add the National Auto and Truck Museum to your schedule. It is located in the Auburn Core Duesenberg Service, Experimental, and New Parts buildings that were built between 1923 and 1930. Current exhibits include a display that chronicles a century of family cars, including station wagons, a model and toy gallery. They have an expansive collection of pedal cars, and there's a display of Hudson-built vehicles, as well as a really interesting exhibit of trucks dating all the way back to 1910. If you're looking for some road trip inspiration that includes a car museum or two, contact my good friends at Road Trip USA. These fine folk eat, drink, and sleep road trips. They work tirelessly to ensure that every client has a memorable, fun, and trouble-free adventure. They also offer an array of little extras that make the trip even better. As an example, when you book a Route 66 adventure, you can add a Kingman, Arizona Historic District walking tour with me as your guide. After all, you know me, I'm good at telling people where to go. I can even show you when you come to Kingman. After what we all went through last year, it's time to start scratching things off the bucket list. Now is the time to contact Route Trip USA and make the dream of road trips come true. Pontiac, Illinois has harnessed the Route 66 renaissance. They've found a way to sell everything on the hog, including the squeal. And they've used Route 66 as a catalyst to transform this little community into a destination. There is a diverse array of museums here, and that includes one on military history, Route 66. Even the Society of Guilders has opened a museum in Pontiac. And their colorful murals are a sight to behold. Some mimic vintage advertisements. And shadowing the historic district is a really beautiful 1870s courthouse. Well, on our last trip back in October 19, I paid a visit to the Pontiac Oakland Museum and Resource Center. To say the least, I was quite impressed. Preserved in this museum are relics that chronicle the entire history of Pontiac and its parent company, Oakland. There's cars, there's neon signs, promotional materials, all spanning the years between 1907 and 2010. And I was really surprised what they've been able to get into this place, because it's not a large building. The museum is housed in an historic Woolworths building. The museum also features an expansive research library for all things Oakland or Pontiac. Needless to say, this is ground zero for Pontiac enthusiasts. If you're planning a visit, check out their website first. They list current events that are coming up, and lots of car clubs organize their events and tours to include a stop in Pontiac. So if you can plan your visit, the museum, the square filled with vintage cars, that's a great way to spend an afternoon. It's easy to find all of the attractions in Pontiac with the Route 66 navigation app. In fact, it's easy to find all sorts of interesting attractions along Route 66 from Chicago to Santa Monica with this app. The expansive point of interest file that I was privileged to help develop is but one of many features that make this app the ultimate navigator for a Route 66 odyssey, and to ensure that you get the most from your Route 66 adventure. Check it out at route66navigation.com. And what better way is there to wrap up a day of adventure on Route 66 or exploring the National Transportation Museum outside of St. Louis than a stay at a time capsule like the Wagon Wheel Motel in Cuba, Missouri? This is the oldest continuously operated motel on Route 66. It is a destination, and I don't say this lightly. It is a truly magical place where the past and present blend seamlessly. As a bonus, Connie has an expansive gift shop with lots of books, including a few that's been defaced with my signature. And if you stop by, please say hello to Connie for us and tell her that it's in our plans to see her come October. This next spot is really, really special for a number of reasons, and there's a little bit of personal to this as well. This is the ye old Carriage shop in Spring Arbor, Michigan. Now, Spring Arbor is just a spit and a hop down the road from Jackson, which is rather fitting as the museum preserves so many tangible links to that city's diverse industrial history. Now, I should note, this is a private museum that is open by appointment only, but Lloyd Ganton is a very generous host that greatly enjoys sharing his treasures and this history with school groups and car clubs. That's a hint, just in case you're planning something special for your car club this year. Keep this place in mind, by all means. At this point, I need to tell you a little bit about Jackson. You know, many Midwestern towns experienced an industrial boom during the closing years of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. But Jackson was different. They had such a diverse array of manufacturers here, and they were often industry leaders. As an example, Spartan. The foundation of the company was as a farm implement manufacturer. It was reorganized as Sparks Withington Company, and in 1909 they began making radiator cooling fan assemblies. Then in 1911, the company initiated mass production of an all-electric car horn using the Spartan name. The horn was adopted by the Hudson Automobile Company as standard equipment. And by 1920, more than 40 automobile companies were using Spartan horns. And here's a little tidbit. In 1915, the company sponsored a campaign to post signs along the National Old Trails Road and Lincoln Highway, advertising safety and the use of Spartan horns. After World War I, the company began working on development of radios, and in 1926 began selling the first radios with push buttons and electric-eyed tuning. And during the 1930s, the company was one of the largest radio manufacturers in the United States. Some of their radios, such as the blue mirrored models, man, these are Art Deco masterpieces. And they even actually made this blue mirrored finish in a floor radio, 3-4 foot high radio. That is something to behold. In 1939, the company began working on the development and manufacture of television receivers. A wide array of Spartan products are part of Mr. Ganton's wonderful collection on display at the Ye Old Carriage Shop Museum. Jackson was also a center of automobile production. Between 1900 and 1925, there were more than 25 manufacturers in the city. And the Jackson Automobile Company, in business for right around 20 years or so, not only built sturdy automobiles that developed a great reputation through things like the Gilmore events with an advertisement, no hill too steep, no sand too deep. And they also built, in the years shortly after World War I, very sturdy 4x4 trucks. They were never as popular as the Jeffrey 4x4 trucks, but they had a reputation. And in Jackson, for 1 year, Buick was manufactured there. Benjamin Briscoe, the fellow that first bankrolled David Buick's auto endeavor, he manufactured a car here, and the Briscoe. And he was an innovative fellow, but his car with one eye was kind of different. There were also dozens of companies that manufactured ancillary components, tools, and other items. This is where it gets personal. One of these was the Hinckley Meyer Tool Company. Now, in the past, I've shared a bit about my grandfather's story. In 1898, he took out a patent on the coaster brake for the bicycle. In 1899, the census listed him as a machinist He was working for David Buick. At some point around 1920, he established a mill and machine shop on Francis Street in Jackson. It was here that he manufactured an array of products. He also did, quote, special projects for Henry Ford at the shop. Now, that part of the story is still a question mark, and anybody who's listening who has information, man, I'd sure like to fill in those blanks. I know the story has validity. For years and years, there was a picture of my grandfather and Henry Ford on the front porch of the family house on Hinckley Boulevard in Vandercook Lake outside of Jackson. The picture disappeared along with other heirlooms when my uncle died in Florida several years ago. So, suffice to say, Jackson history has long been a subject of interest. So I was most appreciative of Mr. Ganton's hospitality when he graciously opened his museum for my dearest friend and I to explore. He has tirelessly worked to collect tangible links to Jackson's industrial history, and I, for one, am most grateful. And that's also a reason why I say this museum is like no other. On display are cars representing more than 15 Jackson-based automobile manufacturers. Some of these cars are the only known existent examples. And the Jackson automotive history doesn't end with the Great Depression. Mr. Ganton also has a Kaiser Darren. This was the first production sports car with a fiberglass body, and it was produced in Jackson. Yeah, for those who are familiar with the Kaiser Darren, it's got a very unique grille. Kind of looks like a Buick sucking a lemon. But he has a lot of other wonderful vehicles on display, including a beautiful Pierce Arrow. But Mr. Ganton's collection is more than radios, horns, and cars. It's a treasure trove. Vintage pedal cars, a complete 1950s kitchen with a personal connection, gas pumps, Coca-Cola memorabilia, and lots of historic signage. I can honestly say, Ye Old Carriage Shop should be a destination for any auto enthusiast. You know, a thought that comes to mind, I might have talked about this, but, I need to do a program on the Jackson area. There are so many interesting places here, such as the Lost Railway Museum out in Grass Lake and other things. There's the former headquarters and manufacturing facilities for the Jackson Automobile Company. Really interesting building, lots of great architectural details. Yeah, maybe I should do a program on Jackson sometime. What do you think? Share your ideas and encourage me just a tad bit here. Guys, I cannot believe how quick time goes when we get together. There's so many other museums I wanted to tell you about, like the Gilmore Museum in Hickory Corner outside of Kalamazoo. It's an expansive campus with a diverse array of exhibits and numerous buildings. This is also home to the Model A Museum, the Lincoln Museum, the Franklin Museum, and as Kalamazoo was home to Checker, they have some interesting checkers on display. Here's a little tidbit for you. It was a complicated arrangement when Morris Markin, the founder of Checker, and E.L. Cord got together. It was so complicated and weird that the SEC got involved. Securities Exchange Commission launched an investigation. But there was a fellow named Herb Snow that had worked on the Cord project for E.L. Cord. And when the companies kind of went together, Checker started using Lycoming engines. And Checker began manufacturing the Auburn Safety Cab, specialty cars for Auburn. Herb Snow stayed on with Checker when the companies went their separate ways. And when the Army put out a call to develop a scout car, which became the Jeep, American Bantam came up with the best prototype, but they were too small, so they went and talked to Checker. Well, Herb Snow tweaked that a little bit, and it's on display at the Gilmore. It's a Jeep prototype with four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering. And the Gilmore, there's another thing about the Gilmore. They have a Model T driving school. And trust me, driving a Model T is not like anything you've ever driven before. And I wanted to tell you about the Automobile Driving Museum in El Segundo, California, where they literally take you for a drive. You can find more information about these museums and in various blog posts on our website, Jim Hinckley's America. And before getting to your questions, I want to say thank you to Joe and the boys of the road crew for our theme song. And I want to say thank you to supporters of our crowdfunding initiative on the Patreon platform. And I want to thank Louis Keene, the unofficial mayor of Uranus. Uranus Fudge Company and General Store is truly an experience. It is the quintessential classic roadside attraction where quirky, juvenile fun truly reigns supreme. And I want to give a shout out to Angela. With dedication and hard work, she's given the Cactus Inn Motel in McLean, Texas, a new lease on life. Remember, the Route 66 adventure doesn't have to end when the sun goes down. This little time capsule dates to the mid-1950s, and the wonderful Red River Steakhouse is within spitting distance. One more item. Next week on Coffee with Jim, the topic of discussion will be Outback Adventures. Invite your friends, dust off the hiking boots, and air up the mountain bike tires. We're going to be heading for the road or the trail less traveled. Now, let's see who we got this morning and what we can do for you. Well, we've got David with us, and Andy's down in Tucson and says it's going to be a tad bit warm. Mr. Carter, good morning. Miss Maggie, all the way from Michigan, and Jim's with us from Edmond, Oklahoma. Miss Maggie, 68 degrees. I don't know. I've been in this country so long, it gets below 80. I start looking for my long underwear. So no escaping the heat if I come to England, huh, Stephen? Andy, I'm not surprised. I think up in Oakland, they still do that egg frying contest on the sidewalks up there. Mr. Bill, all the way in Iowa. You need to make at least, Bill Phillip, you need to set aside at least an entire day. I had to rush the Auto and Truck Museum, and I didn't want to, but I was on a schedule. And I got wound up with the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum. I have waited so long to explore that facility, and man, it's really impressive. And Brian, how are you doing today? Uh-oh, Sherry's with me from us from Needles. God bless. I hope I didn't upset any folks down there, and I do admire your tenacity and survival skills. It is going to be hot. Bill, yeah, Lloyd Ganton is a wonderful, wonderful host. Give him a holler. If you, I think you'd really be impressed. He's a great fellow. The collection that he's amassed, the automotive community, it should be indebted to Mr. Ganton for preserving so much of this obscure history, and that really, really impressive collection. Well, Maggie, that's one vote for Jackson. Nolan, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed this. Do we have any questions? Anything I can answer for you while we're here? Other museums to talk about? Let's see what we got here. It's 75 degrees here today, and Stephen, okay. I will get that corrected. The correct website address, and I will put this up on our Facebook page here quickly. Stephen is with Route Trip USA. You would use, the website is routetripusa.co.uk. Okay, we'll get that up and get that fixed. Thank you, Stephen, for calling that oversight to our attention. Another great museum, one more that just pops into head, I've mentioned this before, Bill, If you're out in Nebraska, and I'm worried about its survival, especially after COVID, because my last visit back in, I think it was 17, it was obvious that the place was being let go. They were just running it and not performing. But Pioneer Village in Minden, Nebraska, uh, just an astounding museum. The core of the collection, the automobiles, were picked up in the 1950s as used cars, Cords, things of this nature that nobody wanted. But he's got cars all the way back to '02, '03. History, it's just a bizarre, eclectic collection, but astounding. An entire history of the outboard motor, lined up, a row of outboard engines, all the way going back to ransomy old aircraft engines, including B-17 rotary engines. History of cameras, history of spark plugs. It's just a real incredible museum. It's on Highway 6 in Minden, Nebraska, almost towards the center of the state on US 6. Small place there. Well, folks, yeah, R.E. Olds Transportation Museum, Lansing, definitely worth giving a shout. And if we're talking Michigan and museums, you got to give a shout out to the Henry Ford Museum and Greenfield Village Complex over in Dearborn. There's another, you can easily lose a couple days with that out, with those places. My friends, I want to thank you again for joining us and for the adventure. It's just always such a delight to see you and to talk with you. And I look forward to be doing this in person. I am starting to get out on the road, take presentations. Michael, yeah, it is huge, but they're really letting the place run down. I mean, it was bad. I was really saddened by some of the things I saw. Jim, most welcome. I'm glad you could join us. I am getting back on the road. I'm doing a special presentation, corporate group on the evolution of U.S. highways and the automotive industry for a corporate group in Vail, Colorado on the 23rd of this month. So if you'd like to schedule a presentation, just give me a holler. We can do it in person or on Zoom. Obviously, it's more fun in person. But I'm open for suggestions. Folks, next week, like I say, Coffee with Jim, we're going to take some outback adventures. Nothing too radical. You know, we're not talking hiking the depths of the Grand Canyon here. But I will share with you some places with just 1 or 2 mile walks. Some of them relatively easy. Some are even shorter, like Camp Beale Springs. And almost, in fact, I would almost say it's wheelchair accessible. The trail is level, very clean, about 100 yards down to the site of Camp Beale, historic Fort Beale. So next week, we'll have a lot of fun on some outback adventures, things you can do to enhance the road trip, if you will. My friends, this has always been a great pleasure of mine, and the only thing I enjoy more than telling people where to go is sharing the adventure. And Stephen, thank you for calling that into my attention. We'll sure get that up for you.
Say hello to a new friend.
Until we meet again, mi amigos. Adios. Vaya con Dios.
Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.